So welcome back. If you're watching this video, I hope that you're halfway through your digital transformation journey and that you've created your vision and now you're thinking about how you're actually going to put it into practice. So you're moving on to part 2. So if you've got to this point, what I hope you've done already is part 1, envisioning, which means that you've chosen your snapshots, you've identified your design principles and actually thought about your future business model and the transitionary steps. What we're now going to start to think about is the delivery stage, how you're going to deliver that future ecosystem, how you're going to shape the external forces, and last but not least, how you're going to capture those future practices, both in terms of the operational practices themselves and how industrial digital technologies can support you to do this. So what we're going to think about is those 3 things in turn. So the first of these steps we're going to look at is how we deliver the future ecosystem. So one thing is absolutely for sure, that the future ecosystem we want may have very, very different operational practices from the ecosystem that we have today. So if we think about our current ecosystem design, it can have quite a slow response. It can have relatively low visibility. In fact, visibility is perhaps the single biggest area for improvement that we consistently hear from manufacturing firms when they talk about their supply chains. The degree of automation and autonomy is low, and operational costs can be high. I mentioned earlier that whilst we seek to be collaborative, we don't really know what it means, and that can lead to tensions with partners collaborating for a while and then not really knowing how to make it work in the longer term. Our supply chains may not be as adaptable as we want, and they're predominantly linear in demand, taking, wasting and dumping. And this leads to really high resource wastage and very intuition-based decisions. We have access to loads of data, but we don't necessarily know how to analyse it or use it, or even if it's good data in the first place. And we tend to be focused on economies of scale, trying to make a small number of things at high volume. Our production lines may be slightly one-size-fits-all, certainly our approach to looking at demand, and we tend to think about skills in silos and in quite a traditional way. And when we look at technology, we might look at limited implementations of technology in a particular use rather than thinking about it in a more holistic way. But imagine a future where we can respond in real time, where we have full end-to-end visibility of the ecosystem that, should we wish it to be, can be fully autonomous and automated. Where we have high collaboration and integration. Indeed, we've actually made co-opetition work. These supply chains are highly adaptable, both dynamically flexible and structurally flexible. They are circular in design, having been designed for circularity from the beginning, which means that they have relatively low wastage. But that's only been enabled because they know how to use the data within them to enable those circular business models, and it's underpinned by the use of advanced data analytics and AI. And what we're aiming for in these supply chains of the future is not just to produce one thing at very high volume economies of scale, but actually to think about how we can repurpose and reuse equipment to make many, many different things and to achieve economies of scope. And this can enable us, should we wish to do so, to make very personalised products, though not every product needs to be personalised. Perhaps every day we still want to eat bread. But in order to do that, we've also created much, much better jobs where automation does the basic things that don't require much cognitive thought, and therefore we can use our people to do more highly personalised production tasks, utilising their advanced digital skills and using unified integrated platforms. But if we're going to achieve this, we have to be mindful that that does sound like utopia, and the world that we face today sounds very, very far from that type of idealistic manufacturing ecosystem. And that's because we're having to deal with a range of different drivers at the moment. We have to live in a world that's got a range of different political and geopolitical uncertainty, has a high degree of regulatory and complexity compliance, where we're never quite sure whether we should be going for cost or quality, where we may be limited by our infrastructure and logistics, where the right skills that we need are not necessarily abundantly available, nor do we have the economic stability that we would really like to thrive and prosper. And that's coupled with different countries having different approaches to how they approach sustainability and environmental concerns, as well as their approach to the adoption of digital technology. And all of this is in a world where the market dynamics both fluctuate within country and between countries. And in any one country on any one day, these drivers are playing out in different ways. And I think I would just ask you all just to take a moment and to think about your own country and the changes it's perhaps seen over the last 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, 5 years. There's very, very different environments in which your firm will have been operating. So therefore, we have to think about how can we respond or shape these external forces to support us to deliver the future manufacturing ecosystem, your future business model that you want. And actually, when we think about all of those different forces, they can create 5 different types of supply chain shocks. They could be environmental, they could be disaster-driven, they could be legal or regulatory-driven, economically driven, or technologically driven. And one thing we know about those shocks that occur is that they could create a global shock, a regional shock, or a local shock, but that those shocks will have an impact on how our supply chains operate, whether that be in terms of operational costs, the way they're structurally aligned, whether or not they create demand fluctuations, supply fluctuations, make it difficult to adopt things, whether they create upskilling issues, or they change our investment profile. Those shocks will have an impact. So a piece of work that we did through Interact was to take a paper that was written by some colleagues, Matthias Holweg and Martin Christopher, back in 2011. It was called Supply Chain 2.0, where they started to think how the global economic crisis was driving a change in the way that we thought about our supply chains. And within that, they created something called a Supply Chain Volatility Index, which was based on the amalgamation of a number of data from a number of different commodity indexes, that gave an indication of how volatile supply chains were. The large peak that you can see third in was the global economic crisis. And what you can see if you look to the right of it, it's been superseded by 2 much bigger peaks, the first of which was COVID-19 and the second of which was the invasion of Ukraine. But generally speaking, if you look at the timeline, the last global shock we saw before the global economic crisis was back in the 1970s, which was the oil crisis. And so what we can see more recently is an increasing both magnitude, so size, and frequency of those shocks. So all this really tells us is that we need supply chains that can be adaptable to shocks, and it needs to be adaptable to shocks that are that could be bigger and actually happen more frequently. So what does this tell us? Well, what it tells us is that the ecosystem needs to develop the operational practices that can amplify or suppress those different drivers' impact. Because some of those drivers could actually present a really positive opportunity, and if that's the case, you want to make sure that you can amplify your organisation's and your ecosystem's response to that driver. Sometimes, though, a driver may have a negative impact, and what you want to be able to do is to be able to respond in a way that can suppress or diminish your company or ecosystem's response to that driver. So the drivers, looking at things like cybersecurity, your sustainability obligations, your degree of technological advancement, logistics costs, value addition, trade barriers, regulatory compliance, your response to natural events, regulation globally and locally, geopolitical considerations, and market dynamics. All of those things could have a positive or negative impact. And And that could change over time. But what you need to think about is those operational practices, the way in which you think about your assets, the way in which you run your operations, your sustainability measures, the way you look at your international financing arrangements, the way in which you work with your supply chain to both collaborate, to compete, the extent to which you share information. They can all have an impact on how you shape those drivers. As can the way that you work with trade bodies. We work with Make UK to be able to lobby to perhaps change regulations, how you think about your relationships and the coordination, the planning across the supply chain, how you think about global logistics and distribution, global sourcing and procurement, the services that you offer, your approach to social responsibility, and how you manoeuvre through the cultural and political landscape. All of those operational practices can amplify or suppress your response to the drivers and are the things that you need to be thinking about proactively as you create that future that you want. And so as we think about how you go ahead to capture those future practices, what you need to think about is how you're going to design that future global manufacturing ecosystem. The outcomes of just about any ecosystem are probably in line with the original ones from the Made Smarter innovation project, in that you will be looking to make your country and its ecosystems more productive, resilient, sustainable and responsible. That you're going to do that by understanding how you adapt your design in response to those external forces, and how you develop the right operational practices and use digital technologies to support those. Now, there are thousands, millions of different digital technologies out there that can serve a range of different purposes. But within a supply chain context, there tends to be 6 major roles that those digital technologies play. They can help you to track things. They can help you to sense things. They can help you to process things in terms of data analytics to monitor and predict decisions. They can help to make your systems more cyber secure. They can help to make sure that you deploy your workforce in the most appropriate way, or to actually help you restructure the ecosystem. And the range of different digital technologies that's out there is huge. When we first heard about the 4th Industrial Revolution, or more accurately, the German government announced its strategy for manufacturing post-global economic crisis, what we started to think much more about was cyber-physical systems. And this is how we actually integrate those systems with automation and those more traditional technologies with the Internet of Things into our manufacturing processes. So this is a much more connected world. What's very vogue and in at the moment is the thought of how we use artificial intelligence and machine learning within our production processes and across our end-to-end supply chains. Additive manufacturing has been seen as an advanced manufacturing technology for a long, long time, but this can actually help us totally change how we make things, because it can make things on demand, or it can actually really help support the circular economy also by enabling us to produce spares and keep things in their highest possible value state for as long as possible. Robotics and automation have always been at the core of the use of digital technologies in manufacturing and can make a huge, huge difference. And it's thinking about perhaps the future of what that looks like, and how we perhaps look at cobots and humans and machines working together, rather than necessarily seeing these as always just replacing the human within the system. And cloud computing and big data, our own research has shown that this is actually where most organisations start, that the first thing they want on their digital journey is just to make sure that they actually have that data infrastructure that's going to support all of those decision making. But whatever type of technology you're going to use, the most important human aspect that you need is change agility, and that has a workforce and an organisation that is both willing to invest, that's both money and time, into its digital transformation, that has the mindset and can upskill and enable its workforce with the right tools and approaches to overcome resistance to change, and can do so actually while staying on the the front end of a very fast and changing regulatory and compliance landscape as things start to change, as technologies enable us to do things in a very different way. But if you can do these things, there's 6 potential benefits. The first is the benefit of improved supply chain flexibility and resilience, which you may achieve through having more data-driven supply chains, which give you real-time visibility and support a much more resilient, decentralized approach or distributed approach to manufacturing. We will also be able to integrate sustainability into our manufacturing that will enable us to be more energy efficient. It will enable us to also be more resource efficient as we reduce waste and improve the circular economy. We'll have better green logistics, more sustainable materials, and also have changed our mindset as well. It will also help us protect the digital ecosystem so that we can avoid cyber attacks, and we know that what we can do is in a cyber resilient way, not just a physically resilient way. And we can empower the workforce for that digital future so that we can upskill them in the use of digital tools, we can help to create collaborative workspaces, we can encourage the use of cross-functional skills and AI and automation collaboration. And so we actually help to create the future of jobs that people want to. A 5th benefit is that this can encourage global collaboration and innovation. At the moment, we may feel that our world is becoming more divided and that we're sinking back into our individual country silos. Actually, if we take a global value chain perspective and look at our ecosystem more broadly, then actually this could encourage supply chains, give us that opportunity to be able to responsibly re-globalize. So we could have global innovation systems, more open innovation platforms, greater supplier collaboration across the world, and greater use of digital supply chain platforms. And last but not least, we should be able to leverage these future technologies to create competitive advantage, not just now, but in 2040 and beyond. And that will make sure that our ecosystems are sustainable, not just today, but for tomorrow. And this will help us always stay on the front foot as new technologies such as quantum or blockchain or edge come through. So just to summarise, as you move into this delivery phase, what you really need to think about is the quote from Thomas Edison. I think the work that you did in part 1, creating a vision, is absolutely essential. But just remember that vision without execution is just a hallucination. Thank you.